All right, guys, we want to welcome everybody into YouTube Model Builders Hangout presentations. This will be the September edition of the Geno Show. Tonight, our special guest will be Big Bill Graham, President and CEO of the South Brooklyn Railroad, aka Catastrophe Railroad. We had Taki Haywood scheduled for tonight, but he had a scheduling issue with work. And talk techniques on overpasses for the October show. So it'll be on next month. But we're happy that Big Bill is with us, and we're going to be discussing layout changes and what drives us to stop in the middle of what we're doing and start all over from scratch. That seems to be the going thing here lately. I know there's a number of us in the community going through the same thing. So we'll just have us a conversation, and hopefully we'll have some good information shared, and tips and techniques, and all around good time. Before we get kicked off, I want to remind everybody to check out the YouTube Model Builders website. It's all your one-stop shop for all the information concerning YouTube Model Builders. www.youtubemodelbuilders.com. You can find information on the live show. The next show will be September the 19th, hosted by Big Bill and Barry. The bi-monthly publication, YouTube Model Builders eMag. This month's issue will be out on the 15th of this month. You can sign up on the website. It's a free subscription, and it'll be sent to your email bi-monthly. And it's always a good source of information. They always have some good articles in there, so y'all be sure to sign up for that. Don't forget our topic-driven hangouts every Tuesday night. Myself, Barry, Troy, and Dude. Every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget Johnny's General Hangout on Thursday night. It's just a General Model Railroad topic, General Model Railroad conversation hangout. And finally, we have our Big Build contest going on, which will be ending this month. So if you haven't already, be sure to get your video submitted. And like I said, you can find all the information about that on the website. And now we'll get into the conversation of the night with Bill. And I'll kick it off with the first question for Bill. I know, you're down in your basement. You got the South Brooklyn rocking and rolling, building structures and adding new details to it. And all of a sudden, we're tearing it down and starting all over. What happened?
Good question. That's a good question. I'll just give you a little background on the South Brooklyn Railroad. Originally, the first layout that was built down in the homestead down in the basement was the Richmond, the new, what was it called? North Shore and Richmond Terminal, Richmond, the NS and RT. The North Shore Richmond Terminal. It was originally built, it was an inverted, it was a dog bone type railroad. And it was a very large railroad. And at the time I had belonged to a club. It was an HO scale, and it had gotten so big, so outlandish, that it just was not, I couldn't maintain it. I just could not maintain it. So the decision, and a lot of the club members had drifted away and, had left, and so it was just me, myself, and I, and my son Mikey, who at the time was about 6 or 7 years old, and he really wasn't into trains, so it was just truly a waste of space and a waste of time. So I had to make a decision. I packed up everything and took it all away, and it was dormant downstairs. The basement, I live in a two-family house with a tenant upstairs, and we share the back room where there's a washer dryer for both myself, my wife, and the tenant upstairs, and there's 2 boilers, natural gas and water heaters. So from 1983, 84, it lay dormant downstairs with always the idea in the back of my head that eventually, someday, at some point, I'm going to build a layout. And with that, I retired from my job in 2010. And as usual, when you retire from someplace, everybody's like, "Oh, you got to get a job. You got to work. You got to keep busy. You got to keep busy." Granted, you do. I understand that. But I worked for 31 years for the city of New York. I was a New York City Transit Authority employee, and my goal in life now is never ever to collect a W-2 form. Never. So my wife said to me, "Why don't you build a model railroad?" And I was like, "You think?" She says, "Yeah, build them downstairs." So I had just recently started getting back into the hobby. I picked up my subscription to Model Railroad magazine, and I happened to come across an article on the beer line layout that the Model Railroad had done a series on. And I said, "Wow, this does," because I didn't want anything, I didn't want to go back to elaborate like I had. I actually, in the last layout on the North Shore and Richmond Terminal layout, it was an inverted dog bone. It was 2 levels. It had a helix. It had a mountain. It had a coal facility on top. It was a lot. It had a big yard. It was continuous running, and it was a lot of railroad. It truly was a lot of railroad. And I was like determined, I'm not getting back into a big railroad. Right. And when I saw this railroad, the beer line, it was based on the Milwaukee Road when they used to switch out the Pabst Blue Ribbon. I said, this works. It was a 4 by 16 feet, which basically was 2 seats of plywood, and build a frame, and let's do it. So that's what I did. I started building in 2011, and I had the layout up and running. Not up and running, I had it built, and I had gotten to the point where I had it scenic, completed, buildings on, and I was running trains. And the only problem was that because it was in a basement, humidity, dust, dirt was creating havoc. And in the summertime, it was a very hostile place to do any kind of modeling because it was always hot in the back. I had rigged up fans it was an open joist on the ceiling in the basement. Actually, if you come to the house and I take you on a tour of the basement, you can actually see the footprints, the mud prints of the construction workers when it rained and the plywood was out in the thing and they stepped on it. You can actually see their footprints, their boot prints. And when the sun would set and the sun would come through the basement casement windows, and if my wife or my son were walking upstairs, you could actually see the dust floating down onto the tracks. So it was constant cleaning, constant cleaning. It was, the trains were herky-jerky. They wouldn't go. They'd start. They'd stop. And I was getting, like, really frustrated. And because the summertime, like April, May, June, when it started warming up, you really literally couldn't go back there. If you went back there, you were in a sauna. So you would sweat profusely, and it just wasn't fun. And it just kind of lay dormant. And then what happened, I was still doing a lot of things. I was building. I started getting involved with the YouTube model when Model Man Mike came along, and you know, I was doing hangouts with him and met Barry and those guys. And I was still very much involved with that, and I didn't want to give up the hobby. I really, truly didn't want to like say but it was coming to the point where I was like,
something got to give.
It wasn't fun. It was starting not to be fun anymore. And I've always been under my philosophy is once it starts being a job, cash it in, throw your chips in and walk away from it. And it just laid down there, and the longer it laid down there and the more I didn't do anything to it, the tracks got dirtier. Cleaning it was, you know, I'd clean a section, and then once that section was clean and I started on the next section, down by the end where the dryers were, it became the sections by the boiler got nasty again. And the other problem that I had down there too was the humidity changes. I would always have buckled switches. I cut gaps in them. I did everything that was prescribed. I cut gaps. I did everything that was done. I still wound up getting buckles in the switches and the turnouts, and it was like, you know, and you guys know, and regardless of where you get your switches at $20-some plus a pop, it adds up. So when you replace them the first time, the second time around, you're looking to salvage them, and you start taking the soldering iron out, and you start fixing what you can fix, and, you know, cutting with the Dremel tool to salvage what you can. But anyway, at that time, I started watching a lot. I was watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I was watching Derek Glass. I was watching a lot of his things, John Prescott at the time, and a couple of other guys. And then I started noticing, hey, I'm putting a new layout. I'm tearing this layout down, which I thought was unheard of. I was like, excuse me for a minute. Excuse me. I was like, you're tearing a layout down. How could you tear a layout down? You guys got this like practically built. But then they showed the plan, and I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And I was like very much intrigued as to why they were doing it and how they were doing it. And it seemed that they were getting an education out of it. And I was like, wow, who's this guy, the track plan? You know, I was like, so right, so in the interim of everything happening, my son moved out, and the bedroom became open. His bedroom became open. So the bedroom's, you know, was there, and I asked my wife, I said, honey bunny, what are we doing with that room? And she was like, well, I thought we'd make it into a true TV room and make this a true living room. And I was like, yeah, we could do that. She says, I was also thinking about using it as a sitting room, you know, putting a nice couch in there. We could go in and, you know, sit, watch the sunset. We could be together, you know.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no. I mean, I love my wife. This December I'll be married 39 years, don't get me wrong. Love her dearly. But I was like, you know, I don't think that worked. So I did the art of negotiating. If anybody, it's a shameless plug for my YouTube video, but if any of you guys out there haven't seen the art of negotiating, please look at it. I got some real helpful man tips there.
It's worth watching.
It is.
If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it.
Yeah. So, no, but my wife, I have to say, throughout this whole journey, I mean, she originally suggested that I get into the hobby again. So when I explained to her about about doing the model railroad in that bedroom, you know, she was like, fine, go for it, you know, do it, you know. And then I reached out to Bill Baronic, the track planner, and I sent him an email, and I was very mildly surprised that within 24 hours I was sent this PDF file with just giving all the information. So I had to take the tape measure out, and I started measuring the room. I started measuring the closet. It has a closet that's 4 by 4 feet. I measured the window. I put everything, every kind of conceivable thing that was in that room, I put it in his questionnaire. I told him what I was interested in, industrial type switching, late 60s, early 70s, urban style, you know. And,
now, I was going to ask you to be now on your first one, the one that was in the basement. Were you operating or were you just running trains?
You know, it got to the point. That's a good question, Geno, because it got to the point. I was involved in a club, and what happened was it became a hangout for club members,
Mm.
and they drink a lot of beer,
Yeah.
but a lot of work wouldn't get done, and it became a sore point with me. It wasn't that I was looking for free labor. It was just that I was spending a lot of money of buying stuff because they would say, well, this is what you need to do and this is what you need to purchase. So, you know, this is way before the internet. You know, I'd like go into Manhattan and to the hobby shops in Manhattan, and I would purchase this equipment and, you know, on my budget. You know, I'd work overtime, obviously, do what I needed to do. But it became a hangout it became like a boys' club, you know. They were drinking beer and they were hanging out and they were doing what they wanted to do, but no work was getting done. So it was a continuous running layout, but there was really the track was down, the helix was in. You could run trains up into the coal mine area. You could run trains around. And that was basically it. We didn't really have any type of operation. Guys would bring their rolling stock over, their engines that they wanted to run. And they would put it on the layout, and they would run their train, you know, which was fine. I didn't have a problem with it, but, you know, let's get down to, you know, working. Let's put something together. I wanted to get the yard in. I wanted to, you know, some other scenic stuff. So it really was a hodgepodge of a lot of different things that didn't work out too well. And, you know, finally had to ask, you know, them to, you know, basically either help or leave,
Right.
and they decided to leave. So, which was a good thing. I mean, you know, I learned a lot. There was a couple of guys in that club that were extremely helpful and very knowledgeable and were very willing to pass along their ideas and their tricks to me. So, you know, it wasn't forgotten or lost on me when I started this one.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I got the plan back from Bill Baronic, and I was in conversation with him, either through email or on the phone, you know. See, that therein lied the other situation, because the other layout was built on an L frame
Mm-hmm.
type thing. It was free floating. It was, you know, and then the next layout, the South Brooklyn Railroad, was a framed 4x16, 2 pieces of sheetrock on a framed, you know, square box.
Right.
You know, now Bill Baronic sends me this plan, and he explains to me what needs to be done. Now, I know which end of a screwdriver to hold, and I know which end of a hammer needs to be handled, but this was just slightly above my pay grade, because he was talking. See, I'm from the school of you have to have a wide shelf.
Right.
You know, like in order to get a lot of railroad, you have to have that 24 to 30 inch wide shelf. Well, Mr. Baronic came and said to me, Bill, you need 10 inches. I said, 10 inches? That's not a lot of railroad. He said, trust me, it's a lot of railroad. Let me do what I do, and you'll see a lot of railroad. Now, where it became above my pay scale was, had I done this layout myself, had I built this layout, which I was pretty confident that I could do it, I would have started out on the premise of measuring 10 inches from the wall, and I would have built the frame. Fortunately for me, I have a very good friend, Darren Brady, who's a great carpenter, and I enlisted his help. I called him up and I said, "Do you have a chop saw?" Which I knew he did.
Right.
You know, it's like calling your friend who's the electrician. You know, do you have wire? You know he has wire. He knows you know he has wire, but you don't want to ask him for help. You want to ask him, do you have a chop saw?
Hey, can you bring it over? Can you bring it over?
Yeah, well, yeah, basically. You know, do you have a chop saw, Darren? Yeah. And then the next question, which I knew was going to come, was, what are you doing? Because he doesn't trust me with sharp implements or power tools. You know. So he says, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm building this layout. He goes, a train layout? I said, yeah. He said, well, okay, I'll come over. I said, okay. So he comes over the next day, brings the truck, and sure enough, out comes the chop saw, out comes the 4-foot level, out comes the bag of tools. He says, where are we putting this layout? I said, in the bedroom, the spare bedroom. So he comes in, he looks around, and takes his tape measure out. He goes, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to Lowe's, and I want you to buy 75 2x4s.
Ooh.
So I go, 75 2x4s. So what do you think we're building here, a house? He goes, no, you need this 2x4s because that's a sturdy piece of wood and you need to put it down. And because you're a big guy, you're going to lean on this thing. You don't want to break it. So I said, well, you know, the guy who drew up the plan, you know, he said 1x3s. He said he doesn't know what he's talking about. I said, I don't know about that, D. I said, I think he does know what he's talking about. Anyway, the long and short of it was we got Mr. Baranek on a speakerphone. And him and Darren went at it. So at one point, Bill Baranek said to him, listen, Darren, Bill's not parking his pilot truck on this layout. He's building a train layout that's going to run HO scale. He says, trust me on this one. 1x3s are what he's going to need, and this is how many he's going to need. I needed like 50 1x3s. So wound up, I had to buy more because we went into the closet, further into the closet. But once we started building it, again, like I said, my thing would have been, I would have built 10 inches, I would have made a frame 10 inches out from the wall. And Darren informed me, had you done what you wanted to do, which he said wasn't a bad idea, he says your actual width would have been almost 11, 12 inches. And I was like, why is that? He says, because you haven't figured in the width of the board, the spaces between it. You have to add that on, and the board itself. That all goes into the calculation. To get a true 10-inch width, you have to take the width of the board, add that into your calculation to give you 10 inches. Had I done what I wanted to do, I'll just build 10 inches across, it would have been 11, 12 inches across, which would have diminished the aisle space around the whole layout. So once that was established and he said, okay, this is what we're going to do, you know, and we threw the framework, no lie, gentlemen, the framework went up here. I have a print here. Let's see if I can get it. I'll share it. Can you all see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is 10 inches right here. All the way around, right to the closet. Here's the closet. Right to the closet. All this was done in 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, was right. 4 hours. The next day, this was all put in a half a morning. This peninsula was the longest to take because we had to put a 2x4 on this wall, and then we had to center it. We had to get the center mark, and then the frame was built underneath it with this solid blue line that you see right down the center here. That's the divider. That's the wall divider. It stands about 3-4 feet tall. It divides the peninsula. So literally when you walk into the bedroom, when you walk into the room, the first thing you see is this and this aisle right here. Mm-hmm. When you walk around, then you see the 3 truss bridges that go across the river, which is, you know, it's like, wow. But Bill Baranek, the track planner, said, this is your wow factor. And I was like, why is that? He says, because when people come into the room, they'll see this right here, and as they come down, they'll see the bridge. But what happens is when they make the turn, they'll see the rest of this, and they'll go, wow. And at first, I thought he was a little bit eccentric. But what happened was a good friend of mine came in, and I said, let me show you what I'm doing. And he walked in, and he was like, wow, this looks pretty cool. And I was like, yeah, this is the divider was up, and the tracks were laid down. And he walked around, and he came right here. Right, I swear, gentlemen, he came right here. He stopped. He looked down the aisle, and he went, holy, you know the rest.
Right.
And he was like, I can't believe you got this in a bedroom. And, you know, and that's where it has been so far. And being in the bedroom, being upstairs, again, the construction of it, if you're deciding that this is what you want to do and you go, that was the other thing. I should back up a little bit, and please forgive me for this. But I got an education out of this. You know, I worked for the subway line, all right, New York City Transit Authority. I operated the trains. I kind of thought I knew what I was talking about. I mean, I know what I'm looking at when I get on a train. I know when I go to see a diesel train or a big, you know, Conrail, whatever. I know what I'm looking at. Operations, why is this was a very, very different animal for me. I wanted something prototypical. I wanted something I could operate. I didn't want a continuous. That's a point-to-point what I showed you. I wanted something I could get busy and I could get hands-on and have operations. Well, Bill really gave me an education. He absolutely did. He wrote out a whole operations planning thing of how the yard would work, what you could do with the yard, how you can switch out industries, how you can do this. And he didn't make it easy. You know, he didn't make it easy. You know, he said, and it really gave time and thought to it. And since doing further investigation, I have come up with the same, you know, like, don't make it easy like putting your cars up front that you're going to switch out to your, you know, mix them up, put them in the back, put them in the middle. You know, put one, if two cars got to go to the, you know, the Cannavelli pasta factory, they're not necessarily two together. They're two, maybe they're the third car and the fifth car. You know, so you got to switch them out. You got to figure it out. So he made that very clear to me. And I thought that was going to be a lot of work, because when you read it, obviously when you read it on paper, you're saying to yourself, man, that's a lot of stuff to think of. But what happened was, when the track was down, and the best advice he gave me was, once the track is down, once your track is laid down, all your track is down. Don't do any scenery. Don't scenic it. Don't put buildings down. Don't build buildings. Don't do anything yet. Just go play with the trains. Wire it up and play with the train. And he was absolutely correct, because what it did was it gave me a fundamental layout, if you will, of how the railroad works, how my railroad works, the intricacies of it. Like, oh, he put this escape track, engine escape in. Why did he do that? When I started playing, I realized, oh, okay, now I got it. And I'll tell you, I'll relate a story. A couple of months ago, I was in that. It's air conditioned, so it was a hot night. Had the AC running in there. It was nice and cool. I go in there about 7:30 in the evening. I just play with one. Let me just show you if I can get it. Did I lose it? I hope I didn't lose it. Yeah, I lost it. I go, well, I guess I can get it back. But anyway, here we go. Let's go. Okay. Let's see where we are here. I just I just want to share this because it's to me it's exciting. You know, and I may be crazy. You see this right here? This is where my cursor is.
Mm-hmm.
I came into the room at 7:30 at night, and I put the trains on here, and all I did, just right here, right up to here, was play with the trains. All I did was switched out. All I did was say, okay, let's just see what this is like. You know, move a train in, take a train, let's break them up, pick up 10, drop 5, drop 2, pick up 3 over here. Let's put the maintenance in, everything, you know, just like that, right? Just in this section.
Mm-hmm.
My wife came in the bedroom and said, I'm going to bed. I said, going to bed? What time is it? And she said, 1:30 in the morning.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was like, 1:30? Are you kidding me? She goes, no, it's 1:30. She says, I'm heading in, baby. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So just on that one section alone was from 7:30 to 1:30 in the morning. So there's enough railroad in there to absolutely, positively, I'm praying for one of the worst snowstorms to hit the Northeast.
Be careful what you wish for.
But I'm stocking up on the bread, the milk, the cookies, the blueberry pancakes, and me and my Thomas the Train slippers are going to be in that room all day, you know, and stuff like that. But it has been an education. I will tell you that. It's a lot different than, you know, like everybody else. I started in this hobby with a 4x8 piece of plywood on sawhorses and snap track from Atlas, and it is evolved to this with the DCC system and, you know, sound locomotives and the whole thing. And it's an education in itself to learn everything that I'm learning, and it's still learning. I'm still learning. You know, I'm always you know, the research into doing certain things. I'm modeling specifically after South Brooklyn in Brooklyn, New York, because the New York City Transit Authority actually had a privately owned, it was called the South Brooklyn Railroad, and what they did was they would switch out from downtown Brooklyn to the waterfront. Mm-hmm. And to this day, there's a remnant. It's now called the New York, New Jersey line, and they do actual street running down in Brooklyn, from 36th Street in Brooklyn all the way down to the piers down on Columbia Street, where they still switch out boxcars and stuff like that, and into the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So there's still live switching that goes on, but the New York City Transit Authority had a South Brooklyn Railroad, and it was called, on the side of their engines, like on mine, was SBK, engine N1 and engine N2, and they would switch out onto the waterfront from boxcars that would come over from New Jersey, and then later on, when new arrivals of the R46, the R68s, these were new subway technology trains, when they would get shipped across the bay, they would pick them up and then transfer them onto the subway line, and then they would bring them to Coney Island Yard where they were tested further on. But there's a history that this actually worked, and they worked in the Bush terminals. You guys can actually look this up. Just type in Bush Terminals and South Brooklyn Railroad. There's a whole website on the old, from the 1910, 1907. They've been there. In order to work on that line, it's based on a seniority line, and you have to have a single-digit seniority number. If your number was anything above 10, you were never going to see that. My seniority, yeah, when I first became a motorman, my seniority number was 3346. Yes. So you can see that as never, but I happened to be what's called extra board. I was sitting on they call you start at 7 in the morning, or whatever time the crew office determines. You sit until something blows up, and then they call and they say, go down to so-and-so and start work. I happen to be sitting at Stillwell Avenue, and I got a call that said, go down to the South Brooklyn Railroad. You're working down there today. So when I went down there, the guy who was in the motorman that worked there, his name was Pico, John Pico, and his file number was #1 in the system.
Oh my God.
33,000 employees. So his number was #1. And he said to me, it's going to be an easy day today, kid. You got traffic. And I was like, traffic? What's traffic? So we're getting ready to move. He says to me, here's this box. I'm like, what is it? I thought it was dynamite. They were actually road flares. He said, you know how to do this? I said, no, I haven't got a clue. He says, just strike the flare and throw it out on the road and make sure no cars come by. Now, you guys are talking, this ain't the country. This is New York City. It's 11 o'clock in the morning on a busy thoroughfare. So they open up the gate, and he starts leaning on the diesel horn. He says, all right, start throwing the flares. So I start throwing flares out there, right? And I threw like 2 flares. He goes, no, man, you got to throw more than 2 flares. You got to empty the box. There must have been about 30 in the thing. I started throwing them out on either side of the road. You think these cars would stop?
No.
He just came out like at 2 miles an hour. These cars were going around him. I had to watch where I was because they were going to run me over. They were cursing, screaming. You know, we finally got across the street, got into the terminal, got into the other side. We got down, and we had to bring out 6 R68s. We had to lash them up and bring them into the terminal. And it was a day's work, but it was an education. So that's basically what my layout is designed after that. Late 60s, early 70s, urban type switching. You know, I got the Brooklyn Sand and Gravel company. The Brooklyn Lollipop Company is in there. The Canavelli Pasta Factory, named after my lovely wife and her murdering giddy brothers. Don't tell her I said that, though.
She's probably sitting right there next to you, as usual.
No, she school started for her, so she's back to teaching. So she hit the hang. So.
All right. Well, while we've got a minute, I'm going to run down the call sheet here real quick. I want to remind everybody to check out YouTube Model Builders Live website, www.youtubemodelbuilderslive.com. Find out all the information about the live show hosted by Bill and Barry. The next show is going to be September the 19th, and I think y'all are going to be covering the returning of the modeling season. Is that not correct, Bill?
That is correct.
Okay. We have the YouTube Model Builders e-mag, bi-monthly publication from YouTube Model Builders. This month's issue will be out on the 15th. It's a free publication. All you have to do is go to the website and sign up, and you will get it delivered straight to your inbox. Don't forget to check out the Tuesday night topic-driven hangouts. Myself, Barry, Dude, and Troy will be rotating every Tuesday night. And Johnny's General Model Railroad Hangouts on Thursday nights. Also, the Big Bill contest is going on. It's going to be winding up this month. So if you haven't got your entries in, be sure to get them posted ASAP. And you can find out all the information on that on the website. All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to share. This is the actual train that I worked on. That actually, this is what we did.
Oh.
So that, as you can see, was what I modeled this after. You know, this is the actual locomotive that they used, and such.
Well, are they hauling a subway car? Is that what he's hauling?
Yeah, that's what they did. They would haul, and this is the. This was down by the docks. You can see right over here is a spare coupler in case they had to do a rescue on one of the subway cars that got, if the train got stuck, they would put this coupler either on the long nose or the short nose, and then they would hook it up because it was adaptable to the subway couplers.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what they would do. But,
what has been the biggest challenge for you so far in transferring from one layout to another?
I think the biggest challenge was the build itself. I think it was doing the physical building of the layout, of the structure itself. And I think the second challenge was the cost.
Right.
The cost was a very big factor. The lumber was, I kind of figured in the lumber, but the other challenge was the cost of the track and the switches. But like everything else, you know, you manage to, you know, put your nickels and dimes together and you get it together. But I would say the biggest challenge was the build. I think what now the challenge is the realization that is this too much railroad for me? You know, that's a question that I ask myself when I go in to the room and I look around and I say, did I overstep it? Did I bite off more than I could chew here?
Mm-hmm.
You know, did I want to do this? I guess what I'm trying to say is, did I let my pride and my ego get in the way? You know, and say, well, I want this and I want that and I want to do this, and you know, but you know, that's why you know, having you, Geno, and Barry, and the rest of you guys out here is a good thing, because you guys give good, you know, you give good advice, and it's a very supportive group. So when I feel like I'm a little overwhelmed, you know, it becomes very apparent that, you know, you're not, you know, you can do
right.
it. And you just take it in sections, you know, take it in sections, take it in strides, do what you can do, and just have fun with it, you know. But like again, I'd say that would be the second challenge. The first challenge was the build itself, the structural build. The laying of the track and the switches and everything else were, you know, pretty much, you know, pretty easy, you know.
Right.
Stuff like that.
I know, and I'm sure myself included, we all, when you undertake a new build or new layout or something, you kind of set your own timetable in your mind of what you want to have when you, and at what point, you know, you're going to get there. Are you satisfied with where you're at so far?
To a certain degree, I am. As always, I think I should be a little further along than where I am right now, but I'm savoring it like a good cup of coffee. It's the best way I can explain it. See, the natural instinct for all of us, and I know I'm speaking with generality here, but the natural instinct is to complete the railroad. The natural instinct is to get railroad running. The natural instinct is to get the scenery down. The natural instinct is to see the finished product, and now we're good. But I've come to realize that it's the little things that make it interesting, that pique your interest, that challenge you. For me, anyway. You know, like doing the bridge. I made the bridge. I made the 3 bridges together. The bridges sat for 3-4 months in the closet, and then I had to do the scenery of it. I had to scenic it. And that was, to be quite honest with you guys, that was the last piece of work I was going to do. The bridge was going to be the last scenic endeavor I was going to do. That was going to be held for the end. I figured I'd just get the bridges down, the bridges up. I'd run track, a temporary piece of track across it, you know, so hook it up, play with it, you know, and then work on the other sections of the railroad. Well, that became, I started doing it a couple of 2-3 weeks ago, and it just took on a life of its own. But with that said, that's now completed. You know, that section is now completed. And what I've come to realize is that I'm not in a hurry to get it done. You know, if my layout, if I scenic half my, not even half my layout, a quarter of my layout, and I just take my time, and people come in and say, well, how come this isn't, you know, it's my layout, you know. I've come to realize that there's a lot more in life than model railroading, unfortunately. I wish it was always, but I've come to, you know, being retired, you think you'd have all this time on your hands. It seems like I don't have all that time on my hands. It seems like, you know, you get up. Yeah, there are days when there's, you know, it's my day. You know, I do what I want to do when I want to do it and how I want to do it. But on the whole, it's usually, you know, got to go see my mom, got to take her to the doctor, you know, got to do things around the house, got to, you know, fix something, do something. And one of the rules of thumb that I have is that I can't work on the layout. I cannot I can't pick up a tweezer until all the basic things are done, which means if food shopping's got to be done, I got to take care of it. The laundry's, I got to do it. I cannot go in the room with a clear conscience and say, what did you do today? Well, I built this fantastic scratch-built building. Well, did you go food shopping? No. Did you do the laundry? Did you go to Easy Pass? Did you pay the gas bill? Did you pay? No, I didn't. So I have to make sure that I get that done. And I usually find I get about a couple of hours in, and I usually find that in the evening, such as this time, I go in and I, you know, putz around a little bit, and I start working on an idea, and it starts coming to fruition, and I take it downstairs to the basement, and I start working on something, and then bingo, it comes alive. But I'm not too concerned about the scenery end. The railroad is down, and I know I'm going to get there, because I want to make sure that I get it done, but I want to do it right. You know, I just don't want to put it together and say, okay, because I'm in a hurry. I don't want it, because that's what I did downstairs in the last 2 layouts. I was in a hurry, and I wanted to. And my ultimate goal was I wanted trains running, and I wanted to see them on a scenic area. And when I planned out the scenic area, it didn't work with the track that was laid. Now the track is laid correctly. The plan is correct. The prototypical situations are in place. So I want to complement that with the right scenery and the right detail to it. So I'm taking my time with it. I'm not in a hurry. And when I get that feeling of like, I got to get this done, I kind of like sit back, relax, take a deep breath. You know, you'll get it done.
That's the kind of the same thing I run in on my last layout. You know, you get in a hurry, you want to get trains running, you want to get things scenic, and you start improvising and going away from your original plan. And then when you go away from the plan, that's when things start going wrong.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly right. I had a situation with the in the closet, in the 4x4 closet. Originally, that was supposed to be a single track that went around. Bill had the track planner had designed just that a single track goes in there and comes around. And my friend Darren said to me, because now the bug caught him, you know, as he's helping to build the layout, he's like starting to really get into this. And he's like, why are you just going to put a single track in there? He says, to be quite honest, that's such a waste of space. He said, that can be an industry in there, right? Or some sort of a building. That's what you guys do, right? And I was like, you know, Darren, you're right. I could put something in there. And the original plan of this, Bill came up with the original plan. We went through 7 plans. 7 redrawings.
Wow.
Until it finally came to the one. And in the one in the closet, it was originally supposed to be the whitewater brewery company, or the Brooklyn Brewery Company. And then one day I was sitting there and I said, you know what? I built the building, I labeled it, it was done, and I wasn't happy with it. Not that the structure wasn't right, it was a good structure. I mean, I built it, you know, some of it was out of the box, some of it I scratch built and I put it, you know, together. And I liked it, you know, but I just wasn't happy. I said, you know, every video I look at, everybody's got a brewery company. They either got the Milwaukee, Pabst Blue Ribbon, you know, whatever. I said, I got to come up with something different. I just got to make it pop. And I was on the Staten Island Expressway, and I happened to be thinking about it. And I happened to turn to, we were stuck in traffic as usual, in the Staten Island Expressway, bumper to bumper. And I happened to turn over to my left, and there was a big tractor trailer right next to me. And I looked up, and on it, it said the Brooklyn Lollipop Company. And I was like, that's it.
There you go. That's it.
So I went, and I purchased the, what is it, the Magic Pan Bakery Company's kit. And I took the silos, and I colored each one differently, and I printed, you know, lettering, Brooklyn Lollipop Company, and I made them different colors of a lollipop. And then I rebuilt the building, and I refabbed it, and put it all, cut the old building apart, and then put everything together again. So things change, you know, and you have to have that license to change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I saw a video once years ago, and I couldn't believe it. The guy had a finished layout. I know most of you know him, Al Mayo. He had this finished layout in his basement, and one day I'm watching this video early in his thing, and he says, you know, this section of the layout, it's not working. It's not working. And he actually took a hammer and he started smashing it, and I was like appalled, like, the hell are you doing? You taking a hammer to your layout? But you know what? He was right, because you got to be comfortable enough to take it apart to fix it, even though you don't want to, but you have to. And that was the situation over there. I could have left the Brooklyn Brewery all alone with the building, the tracks, and everything, and I could have said, all right, and not be happy with it. But why do that? I said, you know, let me be happy with what I want, and that's what I did. And I went out after that, the steamrolled, because what happened was after I got the Brooklyn Brewery put up, you know, I went out and got decals made up for the Brooklyn Lollipop Company, you know, to put on the 40-foot box cars and on the tractor trailers and on the tanker cars, and you know, so it just snowballs into one thing after another. But it's, again, the premise is playing. I'm playing, you know.
Right. That's right. It's got to be fun, you know.
Well, I believe that's the whole thing. The last time I checked, this isn't a dress rehearsal for something that's bigger and better. I mean, this is it, you know. Why, you know, I get it, you know, everybody's serious about their hobby. But the one thing I've come to think is we're playing. At the end of the day, these are just toys. They're expensive, but they're just toys. When we start changing them into, this is my life blood, and this is what I live for, this the be all to the end all, that my philosophy, it's not fun anymore. That's just me. That's, other people have a different take on things, and I understand that and I respect that. But for me, I want to do the best work I can. I want to learn from everybody. I still want to learn. I want to apply it. But I want to have fun doing it. If I'm not having fun doing it, you know, it doesn't.
You won't be doing it for long. You'll be finding something else to do.
Well, you know, I was a baseball coach and manager for quite a number, for 30 years. I coached high school baseball. I coached youths. I coached national teams. I coached, and I loved it. It stopped being fun 2 years ago. My wife said to me, I used to come home burnt, happy, and tired. I was coming home burnt, angry, and tired. She said, it's time. And she was right. It's time. And so I had to walk away from something that I really love, you know. And, you know, I'm doing this now, and I really love this when it stops becoming fun and it's, you know, that's the best. You know, that was one of the most interesting videos I've ever seen from Trainmaster TV. Was they did a series on 3 gentlemen. Lionel Strand was one of them, of tearing down the layout and the reasons for tearing down the layout. I mean, because obviously you've done it, Geno. You've taken down a layout. Most of us here have one way or the other, but when you invest your time and energy into something, you know, and you want to make a change, it's pretty tough to, you know, swallow the bullet. I mean, just that little layout I had downstairs, the 4x16, that really, it took a lot of, that wasn't something like one day I went down there with the Sawzall and the drill and said, okay, let's take this apart. I mean, that was a deep decision. Right. People tell you, oh yeah, when you hear videos, well, I've made a decision to get rid of it. I would like to interview those guys that say that and say, was that on the spot decision, or was that something that was thought over in months? And I would guarantee you that that was thought over. Like the same thing with you going from HO to O scale. I'm sure that was not something you said, yeah, obviously the O scale, a lot more detail, but you've invested time and energy. You had to sit down and say to yourself, all right, what's going to make me satisfied? What's going to make me happy? You know what I mean? So
exactly.
Right.
And those layouts, the Trainmaster TV article you're talking about, those are Marty McGurk from Model Railroader fame took the top deck off his layout. That was one of them. Bob Helm, model of Clinchfield Railroad, also a very famous layout with a lot of YouTube footage with thousands or tens of thousands of followers, and of course Lionel Strang, whose name is infamous with the hobby at this point. Those weren't just model railroads that some guys had in their basement. They were famous railroads that had been on the cover, a few of them on the cover of Model Railroader magazine and in Model Railroader Planning. Those guys destroyed art, masterpieces of artwork that had been the fuel for a tremendous number of model railroaders to build their layouts, and they destroyed them. And the predominant reason is the same reason you did: downsize. That is such a focus these days. Smaller layouts, more focused layouts, and that's what I'd like to say. Size is important, and downsizing layouts is somewhat of a trend. But I don't think it's actually the size that is what's motivating these people. It's focus.
Right. Exactly.
Pointed, laser focused, according to Mike Confalone. Having a laser focus. This is what you're doing. Very specifically, this is what you're trying to accomplish. And people are happier, it seems like, and it's obvious why they are. If you say this very one specific thing is what I'm trying to accomplish, it's a whole lot easier than I'm trying to build this empire that models the entire Pennsylvania Railroad. You're going to let yourself down.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely true.
And that was one thing, and me thinking of, doing the swap from the HO to the O, I knew going into it, I'm going to lose a whole lot of railroad real estate. But my modeling scene has grown drastically.
Yeah, I agree.
And then for me, in which everybody's different, but the detailed scenes is what drives my focus in the hobby. And that was my main drive to swap behind, my decision.
And even the laser focus, you can have a bigger layout. Like I'm only modeling a 20-mile stretch, but I'm building a basement-sized layout. But it's laser focused, like Andy was saying. It's the east slope of the Mullen Pass, and that's all it is,
Yeah, and me and you, I think, Chris, are doing very similar things. I'm going to end up with about a 300-something-foot main line. A lot of people would use that to recreate 100 miles, and I love the 90-mile section of the Clinch Valley District. I do, but I am using 300 feet to model 15 scale miles as accurately as possible. This one little targeted area that has only a few kind of things in it. And at 300 feet is still a lot of main line. But I'm only trying to capture an interchange and a couple sidings and a small, the end of a branch line. It's focused, it's pointed, and this is a word that I really liked. Again, a guy from Trainmaster, Trevor Marshall. He's a modeler that I've just very recently just found and really, really love his work. He's the S-Scale guy on there who builds modules and stuff on Trainmaster TV. And he has a thing on his blog, a subpage of his blog about achievable layouts, and that's the word that I really like, and something that I think a lot of people don't think about. They don't think about what's achievable for them, for their budget, for their level of interest, and we have shorter attention spans these days. And if you're going to get burnt out, you're not going to finish it. And if you don't get it to some, and everybody says a layout's never finished, but if you don't get somewhere close to finished, a little bit close to finished, you don't get that sense of gratification from it. A layout that's half built and you're always looking at plywood, I've done it a lot, and it doesn't feel that gratifying.
Well, what happens is you always feel like you're chasing your tail.
Yeah.
Because what happens is you're always, it's either something that's always impeding your way to get beyond the plywood look,
or it feels so far away.
Right.
I like the word achievable so well here, because it's getting, there will always be so much more to do. There will be stuff to add on, detail to do, buildings to rip out the building that you bought and put in a scratch-built building, things like that. Always more things you can do. Never think it's the end of your layout. But I think we get this idea that we've had this idea for a long time that layouts are never finished, so we have this idea that they're never even very far along, and that shouldn't be true at all. So I've went out of my way. I've only been building my layout for months, maybe a year, and I've got a lot of scenery on it already, even though very little track, just to kind of change my motivation.
Right.
Because I've done a lot of layouts in the past that didn't get a lot of scenery on them, and I got burnt out with it. So I kind of tried to reverse the trend this year. I'm going to do it like the prototype. I'm going to cut trees down to lay track.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And it's a good analogy that you made about achievable progress, because it's like you walk in every time and you see something that's, not done, and you're always picking up something, and you're like, oh, I got to work on this again, I got to finish this, or I can't get that started until this. Then your projects pile up, and after a while, you're like, I don't want to do this.
You spend 2 years or whatever laying track, and a year doing wiring, and a bunch of time doing all this stuff. And those things I like doing some of those things. I love laying track. I hand lay track, and I love it. But doing 2 years of it's not gratifying at all. So the problem is the idea that we're on a mission. We're on a mission from God to build a layout, and and to get it to this point or whatever. But we're not. This is entertainment. So I'm not doing my layout in the most practical way, and I'm a logical guy, very analytical, logical, techie kind of person. I am not building my layout in a logical way. I am building my layout in an entertaining way. That's it. I am entirely entertained by it.
And I think that's exactly how it should be done for each and listen, Andrew, you're absolutely right, and I think that everybody, Chris, Jason, Jim, Phil, and Ron, and Geno, and Andrew as well, I think we all can agree, this day and age, life is hard, man.
Yep.
Look on the news. Things are crazy out there. Bro.
No, don't look on the news.
No, you're right. Don't look on the news. But
don't look down. Don't look down.
but every day, and we can do, if we can, I'm not saying that we're, isolating ourselves from the world and the things that are happening. Obviously not. But sometimes we need a respite from what's going on out there.
Absolutely.
And this is it. This is it. This is where you gather. I'm sitting here now. I'm on the panel. I can see Ron working on his bench. He's engrossed in doing what he's doing, and that's time away from his busy schedule and from his everyday decisions on if the kid needs, he's got to go see the orthodontist, and here's something that I got to take a little bit of time for myself, and it's not selfish. It's just refueling the tank.
It's necessary. It's a psychology necessary thing. Okay, I got back into railroading for that very, very reason. My job is stressful, life is stressful, and I can be sitting at the dinner table eating a great meal, and I am stressed out thinking about some kind of crazy stuff at work. But I can sit down and start building a little gas station or putting foliage on trees.
Exactly.
And I'm lost, man. 2 hours goes by, and the world is collapsing around me, and I don't know it. I love it. I love it.
The zombie apocalypse could be happening, right, and we wouldn't even know it.
No. Just don't let me run out of glue.
That's it. That's it.
Peace of mind time.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. What's next on the agenda for the South Brooklyn?
The next thing on the South Brooklyn is
The next big project, I guess.
well, the next big project is building the Brooklyn Sand and Gravel company, and believe it or not, I was up the other night watching the West Coast baseball games about 1 o'clock in the morning. Actually, the Dodgers and the San Francisco Giants went into extra innings, so they went to the 14th inning. So it was like 2:30 in the morning here. And after the thing was over, the game was over, I switched over. And you know that movie with Denzel Washington, what is it, The Equalizer?
Yeah.
Well, there's a scene in the movie where the guy goes to the sand and gravel company in Boston, and I froze the picture, and I actually wanted to know if there was such a place, and I looked it up on Google that morning, actually 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was actual location. So I downloaded the pictures, and I'm going to see if I can replicate that building for the Brooklyn Sand and Gravel Company. So that would be the next big thing on the next big build. As far as I think after this, I think we're going to start laying ballast in the next couple of weeks, because into the winter. But again, the approach to the whole thing is research.
Exactly.
I'm trying to figure out what's the best combination. I don't want to do the old standard. I really want this to be urban gritty, and I'm trying to make it as urban and as gritty as possible, and dirty. Abandoned automobiles, derelict, stuff going on, and derelict buildings being left. And so I'm trying to go that way. Will I succeed? I don't know. But that's what I'm hoping for. Yeah. But right now, the sand and gravel is in my mind, and I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to put together, like, how am I going to do it in the corner there? Should I build a gravel mountain that it goes into? That's a little unrealistic for an urban setting. So I'm trying to set it up where it's maybe hopper cars come in with the gravel and sand and unload, and then they load it onto the trucks. So it's still in the process, but that would be the next big thing. And then also lighting. I want to do lighting. Downstairs, I wasn't able to light many of the buildings, and that's another thing I want to do. And the fact that I have easy access under the, because that was the other thing. I think if you're planning a layout, I think it's best to plan everything, access under the layout. And one of the few things I learned from my previous 2 layouts is, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2". I'm about 345 pounds. I got the worst knees in the world. I hate getting under layouts. I hate crawling under them. So when this was designed, this layout, I made sure that I could sit in one of those little rolling chairs, little tiny. I picked it up in the Harbor Freight, little chair, and it's on wheels. And I just roll underneath the layout. I just get up, and it's right there, and everything gets done. So I think that I want to do lighting. I also want to do signal crossings. I'm not going to get elaborate into the signals such as wayside signals and stuff like that, because again, it's just crossings. you know, that are going to be like half broken, like one goes up, one goes halfway down. It's the catastrophe. It's the catastrophe railroad, you know. It's got to be the catastrophe railroad. So, you know, I want to make it as, you know, as urban as possible. But, you know, things change, you know, and so. But that's it, you know. I mean that, and it's always evolving. It's always changing. And I have to say, one of the biggest influences, believe it or not, is my wife, Georgianne. I mean, she comes in and she's got a real keen eye for things. You know, like she'll see symmetrically things will be out of balance. Like I had some buildings placed on it, and they just, you know, they weren't working for me. And she happened to come in and tell me that, you know, dinner was ready. She just walked over to the buildings and she just rearranged them. And I was like, oh, that works. You know, so she's very, as much as she's like, well, I don't really know what you're doing, you know, she absolutely has a very big influence on the layout. So, and she's one of my biggest, you know, cheerleaders when it comes to, because sometimes guys, I'll tell you, I come out of that room sometimes and I'm like shaking my head and I'm like, I can't believe I can't get this done. I know I got to call somebody up and find out. And she'll just calmly look at me and she says, you can do it. You can do it. And I go back in there and I'm like, boom, boom, boom. And I come out and she says, what happened? I said, well, I got it to run. She goes, I told you could do it. So, you know, she's my biggest supporter, so, and big influence, you know. Sometimes in the model railroading world, we think we're, you know, I mean, I do. I think that, you know, I step outside my door and I think everybody should know who I am. And then, and then when I mention who I am, the people go, oh. So what, do you play with trains? No, I don't play with trains. Well, that's what it sounds like you do.
I operate.
Yeah. So
this is an impossible hobby. This is an impossible hobby to describe to someone else.
Oh, it is. It is. It is. It absolutely is.
You can describe that you're into remote control airplanes, or you ride Harleys, or you chase women, or you whatever hobby you got. They're all expensive. They all leave you with a whole lot of heartache, etc., etc., etc. This one is impossible to explain. Forget it.
Oh, exactly. You know, the mindset too. I think, you know, you still got, you know, the guys with the trains around the Christmas tree. You know, and that's a hard stigma to overcome.
Yeah, you know, that's a stigma that okay, so on one hand, people are trying to bring that back, saying that that's the reason we don't have youth in the hobby, is that we don't have that entry into the hobby. And then I agree with you that I don't think it was a positive stigma to begin with. I think it set people building 4x8 layouts of circles of track for decades instead of building layouts that gave the real satisfaction of recreating a freight transit system a la, you know, what Big Bill's done with his layout, an operational layout. You know, if people in the 1960s had got the idea of cutting the plywood down the middle, how much further would we be along in the idea of operation, etc.? But the stigma of the Christmas tree and a circle of track built the hobby for 5 or 6 decades.
Yeah, very true.
Have any of y'all seen the the direct TV commercial?
Yes.
What did you think about that?
I thought it was just a very good commercial, and I never get offended. In fact, I'm going to have Mrs. Nesbitt's house placed on my layout. And it's just what it is. I don't get offended by things like that because, you know, that makes for good fodder. You know, that makes for good cover. I mean, I see on Facebook people write, oh, this is terrible. They're making fun. They're not making it, you know, please, everybody, you know, it's PC. Don't get PC. You got to be a little thick-skinned, you know?
Right.
I mean, it's not you. It's not your you know, your mentality isn't, you know.
Well, somebody has to be the butt of every joke.
Exactly.
So take your turn It'll be somebody else's turn next week. Take a turn and get over it. In this country, we got this idea that we can't offend anybody, and what you're doing is kicking the comedians out of the country, and I love comedians. So get over it, people. And they can make fun of me for a little while. You can make fun of me. I'm just dumb old hillbilly with a hard accent, and I will take it. And I'll probably laugh. So.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it is what it is. I mean, they're trying to sell direct TV.
Yeah.
And I'm not a New York Giants fan. I'm a New York Jets fan. So. You know.
But I have a question.
Okay.
Is my turn ever going to end?
Listen, everybody's turn ends eventually, but I'll tell you what, the only surefire guarantee way that your turn ends does not ultimately end up that happy. So I'll tell you what, if I have to be the butt of the joke for 200 years, I'll take it.
So be it. That's it. I thought the commercial was rather funny, but man,
I thought so. I thought so.
I'm like, yeah, I seen a bunch of the comments on some of the Facebook groups, and oh my gosh, you thought the world would come to an end.
Yeah, I saw them too. It was like, you know, they're making fun of my hobby. They're doing it. It's a commercial, guys.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't either, but people are so sensitive about everything anyway. And I'll tell you what, make fun of all you want to. I'm happy with my hobby. I didn't choose my hobby because it's going to make me popular. I love what I do. It is entirely enjoyable to me, and I don't care. I don't care how many people do it. I mean, I would like a lot of people to do it because there's more products being manufactured for it, but ultimately, I don't really care. I don't care if other people get it. You know, it's... And it's just being selfish, but honestly, your hobby is a statement of selfishness. It is, I am going to demand this little cut of my day for myself. I put 8 to 10, 12 hours in for the man. I got 6 to 7, hopefully, more like 5 hours of shut-eye. I hope so I can do it all over again today. So the hour or 2 or whatever time I get to do my hobby, I'm not apologizing for that for nothing. That's the best time I get.
Well, I think, you know, Andrew, I think you're right, and I think that, you know, I think the hobby has certainly come a long way. I've certainly have said this before, you know, in Hangouts and in our meetings, that, you know, the hobby is starting to come out of the basement.
Right.
And I think that a lot of, I think that it's got to come out of the basement. Because I think a lot of people have been shut up in the basement a long time, and they need to come out and see some sunlight. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
There's some people out there that are like, still stuck in 1956. You know.
Internet's been amazing for this hobby. I mean, the internet is amazing for this hobby. Some hobbies, not so much. You know, I can see that remote control airplane guys, I'm not sure the internet has its value. They can find parts, they can talk to other guys, but to actually enjoy their hobby, they can't, you know, the internet's not the best place to do it. It has been an invaluable mechanism for me to enjoy my hobby. Get on here with you fellas while I'm building. I'll tell you what, I've built kind of as much layout as I would have.
Well, I'll tell you how the internet, and I'll tell you how this is affecting Trainmaster TV, YouTube model builders, the Hangouts and the Live. You take, for example, how it's making an impact. The National Model Railroaders Association has their convention yearly, right? What's happening is, as years go on, as we start progressing down the road, a lot of these guys are not able to make that trip because of their age. And they're starting to dwindle in number. Originally, when the National Model Railroads Association was designed and put together, it was for people who were like-minded to get together, to establish, you know, a certain decorum and a certain gauge of how the hobby should be done. I think what's going to happen is the internet is going to replace that, because if we can do what we're doing right now, why can't they do the same thing? And they'll tell you we don't have the internet connection to group all these people together, but this is the wave of the future. Things like this, Trainmaster TV, Ron Perry show that he's doing, you know, it's all works together, and the internet and the technology that goes with it is invaluable, because I go to my wife's 5th grade class when I have a hard time figuring out my iPhone. I give it to I give it to Edgar Martinez, the kid, and I say, here, fix my phone. And he gives it back to me, you know, and he says, oh, here, Mr. Glenn, it's done. I got it. I mean, that's what this is about. These kids, that's why they get so enthralled. But this, I think, is where we're headed. And the internet, I mean, granted, it's nice to have that one-on-one, you know, let's get together, let's meet, let's talk. That's great. I love that. That's into, you know, that's good to sit in a room, you know, coffee, cake, you know, let's, you know, what are we doing? Showing our stuff off to each other. That's, I hope that never goes away. But this is.
And the NMRA is kind of getting left in the dark a little bit. And what I think is more interesting, there's two factors that I want to back you up on that I totally agree with you on, is that if you want to reach the youth in the hobby, technology is not just the way, it's an absolute prerequisite. It's you cannot do it without it, number one. And number two, the thing that I find more interesting is the prototype modeler meet. These smaller, more localized, more regional groups of people who get together where it's not as big a trip, where it's not as doggone expensive to travel and go to, and where you can go to a few cities over, and they're all over the country. I mean, you can't go a couple hundred miles without there being RPM meet. There's 3 within my area, and I'm in the part of the country, the flyover part of the country, where where there's great distances between everything. And the RPM meet are small groups that are easy to go out for a day and kind of, visit a layout or have a little house tour, but mostly show off modeling and show off craftsmanship. And the NMRA has this wide range. Again, it's not laser focused. It's everything from Lionel to G-Gauge to everything in the world, where prototype modelers are exactly what the hobby is becoming. Like Geno said, the hobby's growing up. And it's these guys who are focused on realism and recreating the prototype and weathering and that craftsmanship. That's the word I'm looking for.
Right, craftsmanship.
And these meets are incredible. And the kids are interested in that. Kids these days are not going to be fascinated by Lionel. They're not going to get that. They're not. But the realism and the weathering, you see a lot of these younger, and I say younger, but these 30-something guys that are getting back in the hobby, that's where they're fascinated by.
Right. Absolutely, I agree.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is true. I've seen a lot of younger, like 30-some-year-olds at these train shows that I've been at.
Yeah.
They'll point out the cheap cars that they're not good enough.
Yeah. They're bringing craftsmanship to the forefront.
Yeah.
Fine scale is becoming the standard instead of the outlier in our hobby, and I love it.
Yeah.
I think that there's a niche for everyone here. I think that the level that you come in on, I have seen myself, from when I started back in 1981, 82 till present. There was a span of time that I was away from it. I picked it up again in 2010. But it's like riding a bicycle. You pick it up again, and then all of a sudden you start saying, oh, this is what I can do. And I always wanted to try this, and it does. And if it fails, it's the beauty of, alcohol, denatured alcohol. You can always just wipe it clean and, start again and say, okay. Or you learn from it, hey, I got to put it.
You left the hobby somewhat similar time as I did, and come back to the hobby similar time as I did. I left the hobby for the same prerequisite reasons so many other people do, careers and jobs, and wives, and all those things. So many people do. It's an extremely common story to leave the hobby like that, and I didn't think it was, but I'm finding out that it is such a common story. But you did it at a similar time that I did, and you find that there's some things that are like riding a bicycle, but you had to have this same experience I did. Coming back to the hobby, it's a very, very different hobby. We come back to the hobby, and DCC was a theory that people were talking about, but nobody actually had. To DCC is the golden standard for everything. We left the hobby when things did look like toys, and we come back to the hobby when everything's weathered and super detailed and fine scale. There was a massive transition in that time period.
Well, I remember when I was getting out of the hobby in '82. DCC was on the cusp, and I remember that there was I forget the company, but they were offering something like it was DCC, but they were offering it for $1,500.
Yeah, and it was probably Wangro because that was the one I was so fascinated with. And
Right. I was like $1,500. Meanwhile, I had a block system put in, you know, double switches that were put in, wired blocks, isolated the rail. The train couldn't go in this unless the switches were thrown. And then I left the hobby. I took all those switches, I put them in a box. So when I get back into the hobby, I'm saying to myself, oh, well, I got all those double pole switches. I could just pull them out of the box and put them in. And somebody says to me, oh, no, you know, it's DCC now.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore, you know?
Yeah, just plug in and that's it. And I'm like, what is that? And it took me, you know, it took me a while to understand it. And I was like, okay, well, let's venture out and try it. And I haven't looked back since.
No, and everybody who kind of gets past that little edge of DCC has a little bit of a rough edge to it. People who get past it fall in love with it and go on. And I just finished today my Trains of Thoughts article for the EMAG about DC versus DCC. I wrote a couple pages on that for the EMAG. And one thing, I don't want to destroy the article, but the one thing that I kind of focused on is that DCC, despite everybody absolutely loving it, has a horrible reputation for being so complex, and it's not. It's really not complex. But it has this reputation as being complex because it's possible for it to be complex. And I think all of us in the hobby that get it, that fall in love with it, we're doing it a great disservice by making people feel like it's over their head from the get-go. And it's not. It's as simple as DC. I said in my article, DC plus track plus train equals fun. It's as simple as that. It's the same thing with DCC. DCC plus track plus train equals fun. You get the same thing no matter how. It's ultimately the same thing. 2 wires to the track, no difference. The only difference is, do you want to figure out how to wire toggle switches, or do you want to figure out what button to press on the controller? That's the only argument. And everything else is above and beyond that. And
you know, Andrew, you're absolutely right. But you know what here the situation is with that, and it's a common one. As men, we get it. Here it is. This is the instructions.
Yep.
We do this. The instructions come with the DC. We go,
oh, yeah. There's a picture.
All right, here we go.
Yep.
I'm going to figure this out all by myself, you know?
Yep.
And what happens is, what I've come to understand with DCC, and I did the same thing. When I originally, you know, with the South Brooklyn Railroad downstairs, the original one, I had the old MRC controller. I didn't put a block system in because I knew I was going to do DCC. I went with Bachman, the Easy
Command.
Easy Command, their wireless controller. I went with it. It didn't. That was my introduction, and it was miserable. It was miserable. It didn't work. You had to have the complete. You had to line up the infrared with the pad. It was terrible. Somebody said to me, "You got Digitrax and you got NCE." I happened to be at somebody's house who had an NCE power cab. I liked the way it looked. I liked the way it thing. I went and invested in it. I said to myself, okay, how bad could it be? I took the 2 wires. I put it just like you said, plugged it in. I started playing with the trains. It started running. It says so in the book. If you read the power cab book, it says you will run trains in 15 minutes once you read our instructions.
And
The problem was I took that booklet after I ran the train and I put it on the shelf and it gathered dust. It wasn't until I started building this layout, I said, you know what? Let me take that book off the shelf and start reading, you know. And it's like, you know, and I'm ashamed to say it, I spend more time reading that book than I do the Holy Scriptures in the morning when I should be doing my devotional time, you know, of getting into the Word of God. I'm taking I'm taking my cup of coffee, I'm taking my NCE booklet out, and I'm going, okay, CVs. Now, what is that? And I go through it, and I say, okay. But you're right, it is. You can get as complicated as you want. I mean, you look at Troy on his old N-scale layout.
Oh, yeah.
You look at the wiring that he did underneath that, and how he put a block system in, how he and even go further. Look at Tyreek Sykes. Tyreek Sykes has a little shelf layout, a little corner layout that goes in. You look under that layout and you see the wiring for the detection, the wheel detection, the whole 9 yards. I mean, you can go off the charts with this. You know, really. But again, like you said earlier, the simplicity of it is, that's what I love about it. I can get as complicated as I want, or I can keep it as simple as I want. That's the beauty of it. You're not, you know, if you want to run trains like in the old days with the MRC Power Pack, and you wanted to run 2 trains, you had to put a block system in, isolate the rails. Here, you can run 2 trains. On my layout, the maximum trains would be 3 at the most being run at the same time, but very rarely. So it would be 2. So I don't need all the detection. I don't need all the bells and whistles. You know, I mean, the bells and whistles on the engine, I think, are pretty cool. I mean, I love the fact that when I run it around and I throw the bell on and I put the horn and I hear the operator in the cab, I put it on where he's talking on the radio to the dispatcher. I mean, that's just such realism, and it makes it such more enjoyable than it has. You know, we're so spoiled now. Tell the truth. We're so spoiled that when we see a video of a train running on the layout, if we don't hear sound,
I'm done with it.
Yeah.
I'm shutting this guy down. What's this? I want to hear some locomotives.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
I'm fascinated by all these things that, like, get you in this, that, like, mess with your psychology. So I got this smoke fluid that smells like coal. My wife hates. It smells just slightly like rotten eggs, but it's got this smell to it. And I'm trying to recreate fog. And I got these Pricom soundboards here recently in, and I got sound effects like a river sound effect that's going to be on the layout and play with some of that. These subtle little sound effects that make you, it is amazing what these subtle little technology things can do. You don't have to do it, but
no, you're right.
The basic of DCC down, it's really easy to take the next step and the next step and the next step, and you get this. It's amazing what you can do to get this sense to fool you into thinking you were there. And I don't care what you did 20 years ago, without sound and all this other stuff, it felt like a toy train layout. I don't care how good it looked. And this day and age, the way we build layouts, higher and kind of more in your face, with better detail work, etc., and the sound and lighting effects, it's amazing. It's amazing.
If you go back, even if you look at at old videotapes of people when they, in the early days of YouTube, when they would do, a lot of guys stood behind the camera and they just would point the camera in one direction, in one spot, and you would just see the train go around. And no speaking. I remember when I had the layout downstairs, the guy next door built an N-scale. My neighbor across the street, he had an N-scale layout. And he had one of those when VHS came out with the, and he let me use it. And I narrated it. I narrated the tape. And when he saw the tape, he was like, "Why did you narrate? Just point the camera and just show the train running around. That's what people want to see." But now the point is that you see the early part of videos where they just let the train, and the person who owned it was behind the camera. Now you're seeing a lot more guys in front of the camera and explaining their hobby and explaining in detail what they're doing.
Yeah, and how they got there and how they did it.
Exactly.
Something that really amazed me about this is looking at some of the old Alan Keller videos. Again, the best video footage from 20 years ago. The man was the George Lucas of model railroad. And you go back and look at these exceptional railroads from 20 years ago with exceptional videography, and they pale in comparison to what you can just buy off the shelf and just buy your layout these days. So the craftsmanship that's beyond it. Oh yeah, 100% backing up. Just the fact that you can flip your phone out, and I take so many pictures. I got all the. I don't have a before and an after. I had the 74 steps it took me to get there these days.
That's right. That's right. And I give a lot of credit, and I think on the cusp of this is Model Man Mike. I really do. I think that Mike was very, very instrumental in the beginning of this channel to promote everybody and to get everybody out from behind the cameras. I mean, when he came along and he was doing his videos and he was out there and he was doing it, and then he started doing the hangouts, and he was getting people like you'd get in a hangout, he'd be like, "What are you working on?" Let's see a video. Get out in front of that camera. Let's see you do it. And I mean, the first time I met him, he was like, "You got to get video equipment. You got to go get a camera. You got to go get Pinnacle software. You got to get this. You got to." I mean, I really truly believe that he, was a catalyst in getting guys from behind the camera and saying, "Hey, making them." You want to say YouTube superstars? I don't know, but not everybody's gonna. But guys to get into the hobby. A lot of guys who are comfortable now getting in front of the camera and doing what they're doing. I mean, Geno has his once a month thing. I do my every once in a while. Chris does, and stuff. You get a lot of guys that are taking it a lot further.
Modeler Man Mike said that it doesn't just have to be Tony Custer and these other great model railroaders, but all of us regular guys that are doing cool stuff. All of us. We can get on here, make a video, share it on YouTube, have a bunch of other similar model railroaders like it. And my favorite stuff to watch these days is not Tony Custer and other model railroaders. It's you guys. I would rather see what Geno is doing, and I am just as fascinated by what we're doing as anything I'm seeing in any of the trade presses. Because it's done by real people that I know.
That's right. And, it's you have a resource guide. At the click of your finger. I can, there's somebody out there doing something that I want to know about, and I can watch the video, and then I can get on a hangout and actually talk to that guy, and that's something you can't do when you look at those magazines.
No, the Hangouts are unbelievably. I like YouTube. YouTube is an amazing thing. You can learn anything off of YouTube, but the Hangouts. Being able to watch something that Barry Rozier did, and then if I have some weird question where the decoder or the speaker was slightly out of angle, I'll catch him on a Hangout in the next few weeks and say, "Hey, man, how in the world did you put that speaker in that shape?" And everybody on here is so down to earth, but I'm seeing some of the best modeling I've seen. There's some great modeling coming out of this community, and everybody's modeling is getting better. I mean, I've only been back at this for a year, and not to toot my own horn, but my modeling has got better because of you guys, and I think everybody's is. All boats rise with the tide.
No, I agree. I think the perfect example is Geno did a building in his old thing where he did some lettering, and I saw the lettering, and I was like, well, how did he do that lettering? And I actually called him up. And I said, Geno, how did you do that lettering? And he said, well, you just go to Staples, or no, you go to Michael's or AC Moore and pick out any of the lettering, and just peel and put them on, paint the backdrop, and then put them on, and just paint over it. And I was like, oh.
You know how many times I read something in Model Railroader or Model Railroader Craftsman or something, somebody had wrote a great article about how to do something, and I was impressed with how easy it was. The problem was finding out the easy steps. So it's not that all this stuff's that hard. Weathering is not hard, but I did not weather a car in 20 years of being in the hobby before. I'd never weathered a car. Now every car in my fleet is because I have found that it's not hard. I just didn't know the thing I needed to know.
This is Geno's Birmingham belt line. He sent me up decals, and I got this in a $5 box, this box car, and I painted it up.
Very nice work.
That's a Geno special. I learned that from Geno.
Oh yeah, yeah. Geno, the weatherer I am today.
Exactly.
But I was afraid of it. But I watched what he did, and he does. And Geno, you do great work. I'm not down. You do great work, and there's some techniques that you've done that I have not mastered yet and figured out. There's plenty of them. But the fact that you said, "Hey, this is easy, guys. Just start doing this." The few things that I've taken from you and started doing, I've got great results from. I'm not afraid of it anymore, and I will get better and better and better. And that's one example. I'm watching everybody else do the same thing. You've got Troy and Chris Healy talking about DCC or like hand building track work and stuff. And you know how many more people are now getting into like fast tracks and stuff like that? I'm hearing so much talk about that. And you had a couple people on here who were interested in hand laying like I am, just a couple people. Now everybody's kind of talking about it or thinking about doing it, or it's just, like I said, all boats rise with the tide.
You hear all the little mumbling in the background, the hand laying, and, and which is great. I think it's wonderful, And talking about, watching all these people I watch, to make your modeling look better. You go back to the printed press, one picture can make anything look good.
Oh yeah.
But when you're actually seeing the whole layout and how they're doing it, and I did this and this and this and this, and wow, I never thought of that. Or I never would have known that just reading a general article without hearing the guy actually telling.
And in Model Railroader, the best exposure you will get to a layout is 6 or 7 photos and a couple paragraphs that are extremely edited to give this very specific view. However, the layouts that I see you guys building on here, I've watched video after video after video of you guys. I've seen hangouts of where you're working on this section or on that section or whatever. I mean, and a whole lot of them, I paid a lot of attention, and I mean, I could draw a whole lot of your guys' track plans because I've seen so much of your layout. I couldn't have seen that much in any single video, let alone a magazine article. Because of the hangouts, getting to know each other, we learn each other's layouts, we learn things we like about them, and we get better, or we pull a Troy and tear the whole thing out and start over. There is that.
Well, my weathering came from leaps and bounds, starting off with YouTube. I subscribed to Al Mayo's.
Yeah.
One first. I watched his, and I moved from that setting, and then got onto here and picked up some couple pointers, and then as soon as I saw Geno's and even you, Andy, what you guys done, my weathering came from leaps and bounds when I started.
And it's all just share alike kind of concept, where we all just find techniques, and you can find a technique that works. There's people who do nothing but oil paint weathering because that's the technique that works for them, and there's other people, you find these techniques that may all those different techniques work. You can use oils and inks and all dry powders. You can use whatever works. You got to find the technique that works for you, and all the diversity of techniques on here is what lets you find a technique that just works. Because if the only technique you got exposed to, because there was a Model Railroader article in 1996 about oil paint weathering, if that was the only way you got turned on to weathering and it didn't work for you immediately, you'd give up on it. And the fact that we have so much diversity in this lets us get past the things that don't work for us to find the things that do.
Well, two of the gentlemen, plus Jason, but two of the other gentlemen is Jim and Phil. Both these guys here are new to the hobby, and both of them have, from the beginning of when they came on the Hangout, Jim has done an outstanding job on his layout, on his HO layout. Plus, he's just he got from his dad the LGB, and Phil is in the process of designing and getting ready to build the layout. And I think it's all based on coming to the Hangouts and participating in everything that's been going on. These guys have learned so much and have done so much in such a little time.
And it's awesome to watch it happen right in front of your face, too. I've been on here.
Exactly, yeah.
And with Jimmy, and I've been on here a lot of times with Jimmy, and I've watched him a year ago. All he had was plywood tables, and he was painting his track before it was laid down and cussing because it didn't come out just right. That's how early I started watching his work. And now the stuff he's building, the rock work that I watched him build the other day, and the build, he likes to downplay it or whatever, but he has become a skilled model railroader in a year. And that wouldn't have happened 20 years ago. It took decades of experimentation and failing a lot, and Jimmy's a great example. He's a perfect person to bring up because he's become a skilled model railroader.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm skilled all right.
Don't downplay it, buddy. I've watched you. You've come from cussing something fairly simple a year ago to figuring out something complicated in 2 minutes live on camera the other day. So.
And look, you're in the big build contest.
Right.
Yeah. Look at the encouragement that does for you. I agree with you completely, Bill, that Modeler Man Mike really catalyzed something important here, I think. I'm a fanboy, too.
Well, all right, guys, we have met our time limit, and I want to thank Bill for filling in such short notice for us tonight. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
I want to say thank you to everybody that's on the panel tonight. I think we've had a pretty good show. Remind everybody to check out YouTube Model Builders Live Hangouts, the website, www.youtubemodelbuilders.com. You find out all the information about the live show, the EMAG, the topic-driven hangouts, the general hangouts on Thursday night, and the Big Bill contest. And again, I want to say I appreciate it to everybody, and we will see you the first Tuesday in October. Thanks again, guys. We appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.